They celebrated without me. I didn't mind. I knew what tomorrow would bring. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses drifted through the thin walls of my office as the entire marketing department gathered in the conference room next door, celebrating what they believed was their greatest victory in years. The Hartwell Industries account, a $50 million contract that would secure bonuses, promotions, and job security for everyone involved in landing it. Everyone except me. I sat at my desk, reviewing the final compliance reports that would be submitted to the Securities and Exchange Commission in the morning. Documents that would transform tonight's celebration into tomorrow's catastrophe. The irony wasn't lost on me that while my colleagues toasted their success, I was preparing the paperwork that would destroy it. Sarah called Jennifer Walsh from the doorway, her face flushed with champagne and excitement. "Are you sure you won't join us? This is the biggest win our department has ever had. Marcus brought in Dom Perignon, and David is giving a speech about how this contract is going to change everything for us." I looked at Jennifer, brilliant, hardworking Jennifer who'd spent the last 6 months crafting the marketing strategy that had convinced Hartwell to sign with our firm. She had no idea that her masterpiece was built on a foundation of fraud that would collapse within hours. "I'm fine here," I said, gesturing to the stack of documents on my desk. "Just finishing up some compliance work." "Compliance work? Sarah, it's Friday night. We just landed the biggest client in company history, and you're doing paperwork. Come on. Live a little." Jennifer had no idea that the paperwork I was completing would expose the systematic financial manipulation that had made the Hartwell contract possible. She didn't know that our CEO, Marcus Sterling, had been inflating revenue figures and hiding losses for the past 18 months to make our firm appear more successful than it actually was. She didn't know that the impressive growth metrics that had convinced Hartwell to choose us were fabricated. Most importantly, she didn't know that I'd been documenting every fraudulent transaction, every falsified report, every manipulated number for the past 6 months. Building a case that would bring down the leadership team and probably destroy the careers of everyone who'd been complicit in the deception. "Jennifer, you should get back to the party. I'll be fine. But Sarah, this is your victory too. The financial projections you provided were crucial to closing this deal." Hartwell's CFO specifically mentioned how impressed he was with our company's financial stability and growth trajectory. I felt a familiar knot in my stomach. Jennifer was right. My financial projections had been crucial to closing the deal. The problem was that those projections had been based on the fraudulent data that Marcus had been feeding me for months. I'd unknowingly participated in the deception that had convinced Hartwell to trust us with their marketing budget. "Jennifer, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When you were preparing the marketing strategy for Hartwell, did you ever question the financial data you were given? Did anything seem unusual about our growth numbers?" Jennifer's expression grew puzzled. "No, why would I? The numbers were incredible, but Marcus explained that we'd been underperforming for years and had finally hit our stride. He said the new business development strategies were paying off. And you believed him?" "Why wouldn't I, Sarah? The numbers came from the finance department. They came from you." The words hit me like a physical blow. Jennifer was right. The numbers had come from me. I'd been the one to compile the financial reports that had convinced Hartwell to sign with us. I'd been the unwitting instrument of a fraud that would destroy the careers of people I cared about. "Jennifer, what would you do if you discovered that those numbers weren't accurate? If you found out that the financial stability we presented to Hartwell was exaggerated?" "What do you mean, exaggerated?" "I mean, hypothetically, what if our actual financial position was much weaker than what we told them?" Jennifer laughed, but there was a note of uncertainty in her voice. "Sarah, you're starting to sound paranoid. Why would our own finance department give us inaccurate numbers? Besides, Marcus has been completely transparent about our performance. The board meetings, the quarterly reports, everything has been documented and verified. But what if the documentation itself was the problem? Then I'd want to know the truth. But Sarah, where is this coming from? Do you know something the rest of us don't?" I stared at the compliance reports on my desk, weighing the consequences of honesty against the weight of keeping silent. If I told Jennifer what I'd discovered, she might be able to protect herself, maybe even help expose the fraud before it destroyed more careers. But I'd also be violating the confidentiality of my investigation and potentially compromising the case I'd been building. If I stayed silent, I'd be complicit in the destruction of careers, including Jennifer's, but I'd also be protecting the integrity of an investigation that could bring justice to the people responsible for the fraud. Jennifer, I need to ask you something, and I need you to trust me. Have you been keeping copies of all your work on the Hartwell account? Documentation of your processes? Records of your communications? Evidence of your individual contributions? Why would I need that? Sarah, we're all on the same team here. Because sometimes being on the same team isn't enough to protect you when things go wrong. What things? Sarah, you're really scaring me now. Before I could answer, Marcus Sterling's voice boomed from the conference room, amplified by alcohol and triumph. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to propose a toast to the team that made this impossible dream a reality. To Jennifer Walsh, whose marketing genius convinced Hartwell that we were exactly what they needed. To David Chen, whose presentation skills sealed the deal. To Sarah Mitchell, whose financial analysis proved that we were the stable, growing company that Hartwell could trust with their future. The sound of applause and cheering filled the office. Jennifer beamed at the recognition, probably imagining the promotion and bonus that would come with this success. You see, she said to me, Marcus knows how important your work was to this deal. Sarah, you should be proud of what we've accomplished. I looked at Jennifer's excited face and felt something break inside my chest. She was proud of work that would destroy her career. She was celebrating a victory that would become her downfall. And she had no idea that the person she trusted to provide accurate financial data had been unknowingly feeding her lies for months. Jennifer, I said quietly, what would you do if you found out that everything we told Hartwell was false? If you discovered that we'd convinced them to trust us based on information that wasn't true? That's impossible. Sarah, you provided the financial data yourself. Are you saying you made mistakes in your analysis? I'm saying that the data I was given to analyze might not have been accurate. But who would give you inaccurate data? And why? I pulled out the folder containing the evidence I'd been collecting. Bank statements that didn't match reported revenues, expense reports that had been altered, client payments that had been misrepresented. The systematic fraud that had made our company appear successful while it was actually hemorrhaging money. Jennifer, what I'm about to show you is going to change everything you think you know about this company, about this contract, and about the celebration happening in the next room. Sarah, what are you talking about? I opened the folder and spread the documents across my desk, revealing the financial manipulation that had made the Hartwell contract possible. I'm talking about fraud, Jennifer. Systematic, deliberate fraud that's been going on for 18 months. And tomorrow morning, when I submit these compliance reports to the SEC, everyone who participated in the Hartwell presentation is going to be investigated for securities fraud. Jennifer stared at the documents, her face pale as she began to understand the implications. Including me. Including all of us. The celebration continued in the next room. But Jennifer and I sat in silence, surrounded by evidence that would transform tonight's triumph into tomorrow's disaster. They were celebrating without me, and I didn't mind because I knew what tomorrow would bring. And I knew that the truth was more important than the temporary joy of a victory built on lies. The celebration in the conference room grew louder as the evening progressed. Voices rising with alcohol and the intoxicating belief that they'd achieved something extraordinary. Jennifer sat across from my desk, staring at the documents I'd spread before her. Her face cycling through expressions of disbelief, horror, and dawning understanding. Sarah, she whispered, how long have you known about this? I've been suspicious for about 4 months, but I've only had concrete evidence for the past 6 weeks. 6 weeks, Sarah. We've been working on the Hartwell presentation for 3 months. You knew this was fraud while we were preparing it. I felt the weight of her accusation, the justified anger of someone who'd been unknowingly used as an instrument of deception. Jennifer, I suspected something was wrong, but I didn't have proof until after we'd already submitted the initial proposal. By then, I had to choose between exposing incomplete evidence that might not hold up in court, or building a comprehensive case that could actually bring justice. So you chose to let us all participate in securities fraud while you gathered evidence. I chose to ensure that the people responsible for this fraud couldn't escape justice by claiming ignorance or blaming subordinates. Jennifer picked up one of the bank statements, comparing it to the revenue reports that had been used in the Hartwell presentation. These numbers, Sarah, these are completely different. The revenue we reported to Hartwell is almost double what we actually earned. It's worse than that. Look at the expense reports. I showed her the documentation of how Marcus had been hiding losses by reclassifying them as deferred investments and moving debt between subsidiary accounts to make the parent company appear more profitable. Jennifer, we didn't just exaggerate our success, we created a completely fictional version of our financial position. But the auditors, the board meetings, the quarterly reports, how did Marcus get away with this? By controlling the information flow. The external auditors only see what Marcus shows them. The board gets summaries that Marcus prepares. The quarterly reports are based on the manipulated data that Marcus has been generating. Jennifer was quiet for several minutes, processing the scope of the deception and its implications. Sarah, what happens when you submit these reports tomorrow? The SEC will launch an investigation. They'll freeze company assets, interview employees, and audit every financial transaction for the past 2 years. Marcus will be arrested, probably within a week. And what happens to the rest of us? That depends on what the investigation reveals about who knew what and when. What about the Hartwell contract? It'll be voided immediately. Hartwell will sue us for fraud, and they'll probably win. The company will be bankrupt within 6 months. Jennifer stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the parking lot, where employees were beginning to leave the celebration, their faces bright with excitement about their future prospects. Sarah, all those people, they have no idea what's coming. No, they don't. And you're going to let them find out when the FBI shows up on Monday morning. I joined Jennifer at the window, watching our colleagues say their goodbyes, making plans for weekend celebrations, discussing how they'd spend their expected bonuses. Jennifer, what would you have me do? Warn everyone and give Marcus a chance to destroy evidence. Alert the media and turn this into a circus before the investigation can proceed. Tell Hartwell and give them time to prepare a lawsuit that could destroy any chance of employees recovering their retirement funds. I don't know, but Sarah, watching them celebrate something that's going to destroy their careers, it feels cruel. What's cruel is the fraud that put them in this position. Jennifer, none of this is their fault. But warning them now won't protect them from the consequences. It might help them prepare, or it might make them complicit in a cover-up. Jennifer, the best thing we can do for our colleagues is ensure that the investigation proceeds cleanly, without interference or obstruction. Jennifer returned to her chair, picking up another document from the evidence file. Sarah, can I ask you something? When did you first suspect that something was wrong? About 4 months ago, when I was preparing the quarterly financial statements, the revenue numbers Marcus gave me didn't match the client payment records I had access to. Why didn't you say anything then? I did. I asked Marcus about the discrepancies, and he explained that there had been some timing issues with payment processing, that some revenue had been recorded in different quarters than I expected. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him. Jennifer, Marcus has been my boss for 3 years. I trusted him, respected him, thought he was one of the most ethical executives I'd ever worked with. So what changed? I started keeping my own records, tracking client payments independently, monitoring expense reports, comparing our internal data with publicly available information about our competitors. The pattern of manipulation became impossible to ignore. Jennifer was quiet for a moment, then asked the question I'd been dreading. Sarah, why didn't you come to me when you first suspected fraud? We've been friends for 5 years. We've worked together on dozens of projects. Why didn't you trust me enough to share your concerns?" I looked at Jennifer, seeing the hurt in her eyes, understanding that my investigation had damaged more than just financial statements, because I was afraid you'd try to talk me out of pursuing it, because I was afraid you'd want to give Marcus the benefit of the doubt, because I was afraid that your loyalty to the team would override your commitment to the truth. So you decided to investigate alone. I decided to protect you from having to choose between friendship and ethics. That wasn't your choice to make. Sarah, she was right, and I knew it. My decision to investigate alone had been motivated as much by fear as by ethics. Fear that Jennifer would choose loyalty over justice. Fear that I'd lose her friendship. Fear that I'd be isolated in my pursuit of the truth. Jennifer, I'm sorry. You deserved to know what was happening, and you deserved the chance to make your own decisions about how to respond. Yes, I did. Sarah, do you realize that your investigation has made me complicit in fraud? I've been presenting falsified financial data to clients for months, and I had no idea it was false because you didn't trust me enough to share your suspicions. The accusation hit harder than I'd expected. Jennifer was right. My decision to investigate secretly had made her an unwitting participant in the very fraud I was trying to expose. Jennifer, I was trying to protect you. You were trying to protect yourself. Sarah, if you'd shared your suspicions with me 4 months ago, we could have investigated together. We could have protected our colleagues, warned our clients, maybe even prevented some of the damage. Or Marcus could have destroyed the evidence and continued the fraud indefinitely. We'll never know, will we? Because you made that decision for all of us. I sat back down at my desk, feeling the weight of Jennifer's criticism and the complexity of the choices I'd made. Jennifer, what would you have done if I'd come to you 4 months ago with suspicions, but no proof? I would have helped you find proof. I would have supported your investigation. I would have been your ally instead of your unwitting accomplice. And if Marcus had discovered what we were doing, then we would have faced the consequences together, instead of you facing them alone while I remained ignorant. The celebration in the conference room was winding down, voices becoming quieter as people prepared to leave. Through the walls, I could hear Marcus giving what sounded like a closing speech, probably thanking everyone for their hard work and promising that this was just the beginning of great things to come. Sarah, Jennifer said, what happens to us now? To our friendship? I don't know. I hope we can work through this. But I understand if you can't forgive me for keeping you in the dark. It's not about forgiveness, Sarah, it's about trust. You made a decision that affected my career, my reputation, my future, and you made it without consulting me. How do I trust someone who would do that? I don't know. But Jennifer, I hope you'll give me the chance to earn that trust back. Maybe. But first, we need to get through tomorrow. Sarah, when you submit those reports, what should I do? How do I protect myself when the investigation starts? Tell the truth. Document everything you remember about how you received information and prepared presentations. Be completely honest about what you knew and when you knew it, and hope that's enough. And hope that the truth is enough to distinguish between the people who committed fraud and the people who were deceived by it. As Jennifer gathered her things to leave, I realized that tomorrow would bring more than just the exposure of financial fraud. It would bring the reckoning for all the choices I'd made in pursuit of justice, including the choice to pursue it alone. They had celebrated without me tonight, and I hadn't minded because I knew what tomorrow would bring. But now I was beginning to understand that tomorrow would bring consequences. I hadn't fully considered, not just for the people who'd committed fraud, but for the people who'd been trying to stop it. I arrived at the office at 6 a.m. on Monday morning, 2 hours before anyone else, carrying the sealed envelope that contained the compliance reports I'd submit to the SEC by noon. The building felt different in the early morning silence, less like the vibrant workplace where people pursued their careers, and more like a crime scene waiting to be discovered. My phone had been buzzing since 5:30, with text messages from colleagues who'd heard rumors over the weekend. Word was spreading that something significant was happening, though no one seemed to know exactly what. I was reviewing the final documents when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Through my office window, I could see Marcus Sterling approaching. His usual confident stride replaced by something that looked like urgency. "Sarah," he said, entering my office without knocking, "we need to talk." "Good morning, Marcus. What can I do for you?" "I think you know what this is about." He closed the door behind him and sat down across from my desk, his eyes immediately focusing on the envelope beside my computer. "Sarah, I know you've been asking questions about our financial reporting procedures." I felt my pulse quicken but kept my expression neutral. "I ask questions about financial procedures every day. Marcus, it's my job. Not these kinds of questions. Questions about revenue recognition, expense classification, subsidiary accounting. Questions that suggest you don't trust the information you're being given. Should I trust it?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying my face with the calculating expression of someone trying to determine how much I knew and how much damage I could cause. "Sarah, you're a talented financial analyst, but you don't have the full picture of our business operations. Some of the decisions I've made might seem unusual from your perspective, but they're all within legal guidelines and industry standards." "Are they?" "Yes, they are. Sarah, I'm concerned that you might be misinterpreting standard accounting practices as something more sinister." I opened my laptop and pulled up one of the documents I'd been analyzing, a revenue report that showed payments from clients who'd actually terminated their contracts months earlier. "Marcus, can you help me understand this? We're showing revenue from Hartwell Industries for services we haven't provided yet based on a contract that was signed on Friday. How is that consistent with revenue recognition standards?" Marcus glanced at the screen, his face remaining carefully neutral. "That's an advance payment, Sarah. Perfectly standard in our industry. An advance payment of $12 million for services that won't be delivered for 6 months. Hartwell wanted to secure our services for the entire fiscal year. They requested the advance payment structure." I pulled up another document, the actual contract with Hartwell, which showed a completely different payment schedule. "Marcus, this is the signed contract. It shows quarterly payments based on deliverables, not advance payments. The $12 million we're showing as revenue doesn't exist." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at the contract, probably calculating whether denial or confession would better serve his interests. "Sarah, there are aspects of our client relationships that you're not privy to. Side agreements, verbal commitments, arrangements that aren't reflected in the standard contracts. Verbal commitments for $12 million. Complex business relationships often involve complex financial arrangements." I turned my laptop screen toward him, showing the bank records that proved no payment had been received from Hartwell. "Marcus, our bank records show no deposit from Hartwell Industries. The revenue you're reporting doesn't exist in any form, not as advance payment, not as verbal commitment, not as anything other than a number you created." Marcus's composure finally cracked. He leaned back in his chair, his face cycling through expressions of anger, calculation, and something that might have been resignation. "Sarah, what do you want?" "I want the truth. The truth is complicated. The truth is that you've been fabricating revenue numbers for 18 months to make this company appear more successful than it actually is. The truth is that I've been managing our financial reporting to reflect our true potential rather than our temporary setbacks. By lying to clients, investors, and employees, by presenting our performance in the most favorable light possible while working to achieve the growth we've promised." I pulled out the folder containing all the evidence I'd gathered, bank statements, expense reports, client communications, audit trails that documented the systematic nature of the fraud. "Marcus, this isn't creative accounting or optimistic projections. This is securities fraud. You've been reporting revenue that doesn't exist, hiding expenses that do exist, and using the falsified data to secure contracts and investments." Marcus stared at the evidence spread across my desk, probably realizing that his carefully constructed deception had been thoroughly documented. "Sarah, what are you planning to do with this information?" "I'm submitting a compliance report to the SEC this morning that will destroy this company. It will destroy the careers of everyone who works here. The fraud will destroy this company." Marcus Camusicus, I'm just documenting it. Sarah, please, we can work this out. We can correct the reporting errors, implement new oversight procedures, ensure that this never happens again. Reporting errors. Marcus, you've been committing fraud for 18 months. You've deceived clients, manipulated financial statements, and put every employee of this company at risk. I was trying to save the company. Sarah, we were struggling, losing clients, facing bankruptcy. The adjustments I made bought us time to turn things around. By lying to everyone who trusted us. By managing perceptions until reality could catch up. I looked at this man who'd been my boss for 3 years, who I'd respected and trusted, who was now trying to justify 18 months of systematic fraud as a business strategy. Marcus, do you understand what you've done to the people who work here? Jennifer Walsh spent 3 months creating a marketing strategy based on false financial data. David Chen presented fabricated growth projections to Hartwell's board of directors. Every employee who worked on client presentations has unknowingly participated in securities fraud. They were following orders, using the information they were given. Sarah, none of them will be held responsible for decisions they didn't make. That's not how securities fraud investigations work. Marcus, everyone who presented false information to clients will be questioned, investigated, potentially prosecuted. Then don't submit the report. Sarah, we can fix this internally, protect our employees, preserve the company, and allow you to continue the fraud. Allow me to correct the mistakes I've made. I stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the parking lot, where employees were beginning to arrive for what they thought would be a normal Monday morning. Marcus, the mistake you made was thinking that fraud was a solution to business problems. The mistake you made was believing that you could build sustainable success on a foundation of lies. Sarah, please. The mistake you made was assuming that I would be complicit in deception once I discovered it. I returned to my desk and picked up the sealed envelope containing the compliance reports. Marcus, in about 3 hours, I'm going to submit these documents to the FBI. You have until then to decide whether you want to cooperate with the investigation or whether you want to be arrested when federal agents show up at your home. And if I cooperate, then maybe you can minimize the damage to the employees who trusted you. Maybe you can help distinguish between the people who committed fraud and the people who were. Deceived by it, Marcus stood to leave, then paused at the door. Sarah, why didn't you come to me when you first suspected problems? Why didn't you give me the chance to explain or correct the issues? Because I did come to you, Marcus, for months ago when I first noticed discrepancies. You lied to me then, just like you've been lying to everyone else. I was trying to protect the company. You were trying to protect yourself. Marcus, the company would have survived financial difficulties. It won't survive the fraud you committed to hide them. After Marcus left my office, I sat alone for several minutes, thinking about the conversation and its implications. In 3 hours, I would submit the reports that would destroy the careers of people I cared about, end the company I'd worked for, and expose fraud that would reverberate throughout our industry. But I would also be ensuring that the truth finally came to light. That justice was served, and that the people responsible for the deception faced the consequences of their choices. They had celebrated without me on Friday night, and I hadn't minded because I knew what Monday would bring. Now Monday was here, and it was time to discover whether the pursuit of justice was worth the cost of the relationships and careers that would be destroyed in the process. At 11:30 a.m., I walked into the conference room where the entire senior staff had been hastily assembled for what Marcus had announced as an urgent company meeting. 23 faces looked up at me as I entered, some curious, some concerned, all of them unaware that their professional lives were about to change forever. Jennifer sat near the front, her expression tense with the knowledge she'd gained over the weekend. David Chen, our head of business development, was reviewing notes from the Hartwell presentation, probably preparing to discuss implementation strategies. Maria Santos from HR looked confused about why she'd been called to what was supposed to be a strategic planning meeting. Marcus stood at the head of the table, his usual confidence replaced by something that looked like barely controlled panic. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," he began, his voice carrying none of its usual authority. "I've called this meeting to discuss some developments that will affect our operations going forward." I took my seat at the far end of the table, the sealed envelope containing the SEC reports beside my laptop. In 30 minutes, I would submit documents that would transform this room full of colleagues into witnesses in a federal investigation. "As you know," Marcus continued, "we've been experiencing tremendous growth over the past 18 months. The Hartwell contract represents the culmination of that growth, but it also presents some challenges that we need to address." David Chen leaned forward, his expression interested. "What kind of challenges?" "Marcus, the implementation timeline is aggressive, but we've handled complex rollouts before. The challenges aren't operational, David. They regulatory." A murmur ran through the room. Several people exchanged glances, probably wondering what regulatory issues could affect a marketing firm. "I need to inform you that the SEC has raised some questions about our financial reporting practices," Marcus said, his voice carefully controlled. "They've requested documentation of our revenue recognition procedures and expense classification methods." The murmur became a buzz of concerned voices. Jennifer caught my eye across the table, her expression asking whether this was connected to what I'd shown her on Friday night. "Marcus," said Tom Bradley from our legal department, "what kind of questions? Are we talking about a routine audit or something more serious?" "We're talking about a formal investigation into potential securities fraud." The room fell silent. 23 people stared at Marcus, trying to process what he'd just told them. Securities fraud. Maria Santos's voice was barely a whisper. "Marcus, what does that mean for the company? What does it mean for our jobs?" "It means," I said, standing up and opening my laptop, "that for the past 18 months, this company has been reporting revenue that doesn't exist and hiding expenses that do exist. It means that every financial projection we've presented to clients has been based on falsified data." All eyes turned to me. Marcus's face went white as he realized what was happening. "Sarah," he said, "I don't think this is the appropriate forum." "This is exactly the appropriate forum, Marcus. These people have a right to know that they've been unknowingly participating in fraud." I connected my laptop to the conference room display and pulled up the evidence I'd been compiling for months. "What you're about to see," I continued, "is documentation of systematic financial manipulation that has been going on since January of last year." The first slide showed a comparison between reported revenue and actual client payments. The discrepancy was staggering. We'd been reporting nearly double our actual income. "Jesus Christ," David Chen whispered. "Sarah, are you saying that all our growth numbers are fake?" "I'm saying that the revenue we reported to Hartwell Industries, the growth projections we used to secure their contract, the financial stability we promised them, none of it was real." Jennifer raised her hand, her voice shaking. "Sarah, the marketing strategy I developed for Hartwell was based on our financial performance data. If that data was false, double quotes, then your strategy was based on lies. And Hartwell signed a contract with a company that doesn't actually exist in the form we presented to them." The room erupted in angry voices, confused questions, and demands for explanation. Marcus was frantically trying to regain control of the meeting, but the damage was done. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos, "please let me finish. What I'm showing you is evidence that will be submitted to the Securities and Exchange Commission in 15 minutes. By this afternoon, federal investigators will be interviewing employees, freezing company assets, and auditing every financial transaction we've made." "Sarah," Tom Bradley said, his legal training kicking in, "are you saying that everyone in this room is potentially facing criminal charges?" "I'm saying that everyone who presented false information to clients will be investigated. Whether you face charges will depend on what the investigation reveals about your knowledge and intent." Maria Santos stood up, her face pale with panic. "But we didn't know the information was false. We were just doing our jobs, using the data we were given." "That's exactly what you should tell the investigators when they interview you." Marcus finally found his voice. "Sarah, this is completely inappropriate. You're creating panic based on speculation and misinterpretation. I'm creating awareness based on 18 months of documented fraud. I clicked to the next slide, showing bank records that proved no payment had been received from Hartwell despite our reported revenue. Marcus, would you like to explain to everyone how we're showing $12 million in revenue from a client who hasn't paid us a penny? That's a timing issue with payment processing. It's fraud. Marcus and everyone in this room deserves to know that their careers are at risk because of your decisions. David. Chen was staring at his notes from the Hartwell presentation, probably realizing that every number he'd presented to their board was false. Sarah, he said, what happens to the Hartwell contract? It'll be voided immediately. They'll sue us for fraud, and they'll probably win. The company will be bankrupt within months, and our jobs, gone. All of them. The silence that followed was deafening. 23 people sat around the conference table, processing the fact that their careers, their financial security, their professional reputations were about to be destroyed by fraud they'd unknowingly participated in. Sarah Jennifer said, "Why didn't you warn us sooner? If you've known about this for months, why didn't you give us a chance to protect ourselves?" It was the question I'd been dreading, and I knew that my answer would determine whether these people saw me as a whistleblower or a traitor. Because warning, you would have given Marcus a chance to destroy evidence and continue the fraud. Because alerting clients prematurely could have compromised the investigation. Because the best way to protect innocent employees was to ensure that the investigation proceeded cleanly and thoroughly. So you decided to sacrifice our careers to build your case. I decided to prioritize justice over convenience. Jennifer, none of you are responsible for Marcus's fraud, but all of you would have been complicit in a cover-up if I'd warned you in advance. Marcus slammed his hand on the table, his composure finally cracking completely. Sarah, you've destroyed this company. You've destroyed the careers of 23 innocent people who were just doing their jobs. No, Marcus. You destroyed this company when you decided to build it on a foundation of lies. You destroyed these careers when you made them dependent on fraud for their success. I was trying to save the company, you were trying to save yourself. Marcus, every decision you made was designed to protect your position and your reputation, regardless of the cost to everyone else. I looked around the table at the faces of people I'd worked with for years, people whose careers were about to be destroyed by circumstances beyond their control. I know this is devastating news, I said. I know you feel betrayed, confused, angry, but I want you to understand something. The investigation that's about to begin will distinguish between the people who committed fraud and the people who were deceived by it. Your best protection is complete honesty about what you knew and when you knew it. And what about you? David Chen asked. What happens to the person who exposed the fraud? I'll be investigated like everyone else. I'll be questioned about my role in preparing the false financial reports. I'll face the same scrutiny as everyone in this room, but you'll also be protected as a whistleblower, Tom Bradley added. Sarah, you'll probably be the only person in this room who doesn't lose their career. Maybe. Or maybe I'll be seen as complicit in the fraud I helped document. Tom, I don't know what's going to happen to any of us. I closed my laptop and picked up the sealed envelope containing the SEC reports. What I do know is that in 10 minutes, I'm going to submit documentation that will expose 18 months of systematic fraud. The investigation that follows will be thorough, fair, and focused on finding the truth. As I walked toward the door, Marcus called after me. Sarah, you could have come to me privately. We could have worked this out without destroying everyone's careers. I turned back to face the room one last time. Marcus, I did come to you privately 4 months ago. You lied to me then, just like you've been lying to everyone else. The only difference is that now the lies are going to stop. I left them sitting in stunned silence. 23 people whose Friday night celebration had become Monday morning devastation. They had celebrated without me, and I hadn't minded because I knew what today would bring. Now they knew too, and the real question was whether the pursuit of justice was worth the cost of the relationships and careers that would be destroyed in its wake. 6 months after submitting the SEC reports that exposed the fraud at Sterling Marketing Group. I sat in the federal courthouse, waiting to testify in the criminal trial of Marcus Sterling. The company had collapsed within weeks of the investigation's launch. Just as I'd predicted, but the aftermath had been more complex than anyone had anticipated. The courtroom was filled with familiar faces, former colleagues who'd been called as witnesses, clients who'd been defrauded, investors who'd lost money based on falsified financial statements. In the defendant's table sat Marcus, looking older and more fragile than the confident executive who'd once commanded our respect. Ms. Mitchell, the prosecutor said as I took the witness stand, you were employed as senior financial analyst at Sterling Marketing Group for 3 years. Can you tell the court what led you to suspect that financial fraud was occurring? I looked out at the courtroom, seeing Jennifer Walsh in the gallery, David Chen near the back, Maria Santos taking notes for the civil lawsuit she'd filed against the company. These were people whose careers had been destroyed by Marcus's fraud, but who'd also been hurt by my decision to investigate secretly. I first noticed discrepancies in our revenue reporting in January, I began. Client payments weren't matching the revenue figures we were reporting internally and to external parties. And what did you do when you noticed these discrepancies? I brought them to Mr. Sterling's attention. He explained them as timing issues with payment processing. Did you believe his explanation? Initially, yes. But when the discrepancies continued and grew larger, I began conducting my own investigation. The prosecutor walked me through the evidence I'd gathered. The falsified bank statements, the manipulated expense reports, the systematic inflation of revenue figures that had made Sterling Marketing appear far more successful than it actually was. Ms. Mitchell, why didn't you report your suspicions to authorities immediately upon discovering them? It was the question that had haunted me for months, the decision that had cost me friendships and professional relationships. Because I wanted to ensure that I had comprehensive evidence that would lead to successful prosecution. I was concerned that premature disclosure might allow evidence to be destroyed or the fraud to continue, and during the months you were gathering evidence, did you warn your colleagues that they might be unknowingly participating in fraud? No, I did not. Why not? I looked at Jennifer, remembering the hurt in her eyes when she'd learned that I'd known about the fraud while she was preparing presentations based on false data. Because I believed that warning them would compromise the investigation and potentially make them complicit in a cover-up. After my testimony, I met Jennifer for coffee at the same shop where I'd first shown her the evidence of Marcus's fraud. She looked tired but determined, having spent the past 6 months rebuilding her career at a smaller firm that valued her skills despite the controversy surrounding her previous employment. How are you holding up? I asked. Better than I expected. The new job is good, and I'm finally sleeping through the night again. I'm glad. Jennifer, I know the past 6 months have been difficult. Sarah, stop. We've been through this conversation already. She was right. We'd had multiple discussions about my decision to investigate alone, about the consequences for our colleagues, about whether I could have handled things differently. I know you think I made the wrong choice, I said. I think you made the choice you thought was right at the time. I also think it was a choice that prioritized abstract justice over concrete relationships. And I think warning everyone would have prioritized short-term comfort over long-term accountability. Jennifer smiled sadly. And that's why we'll probably never agree about this. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Two friends who'd been changed by circumstances beyond their control. Jennifer, can I ask you something? Do you think Marcus would have been convicted if I'd handled the investigation differently? I don't know, but I think more of our colleagues would have trusted you if you'd included them in the process instead of protecting them from it. Even if inclusion meant making them complicit. Even if protection meant making them victims. That evening, I received a call from Tom Bradley, who'd been hired as general counsel for a nonprofit organization after being cleared of any wrongdoing in the Sterling investigation. Sarah, I wanted to let you know that the civil settlements were finalized today. The clients who were defrauded will recover about 60 cents on the dollar. That's better than I expected. It's largely because of the evidence you provided. The documentation you gathered made it impossible for Marcus to claim ignorance or minimize the scope of the fraud. And the employees. Most of them have found new positions. A few are still struggling with the reputation damage. But the investigation's findings helped establish that they were victims rather than perpetrators. What about Marcus? He'll probably get 8 to 10 years. His cooperation with the investigation helped reduce his sentence. But the scope of the fraud was too extensive for a lighter punishment. After hanging up with Tom, I sat in my apartment, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this point. 6 months ago, I'd been a financial analyst who'd discovered fraud and made the difficult decision to expose it. Today, I was a federal witness whose testimony had helped convict a criminal, but had also cost me relationships with people I'd cared about. The investigation had vindicated my decision to gather comprehensive evidence before reporting the fraud. Marcus's conviction was largely based on the documentation I'd provided, and the thoroughness of my investigation had helped protect innocent employees from prosecution. But the personal cost had been higher than I'd anticipated. My relationship with Jennifer was permanently changed. Several former colleagues blamed me for the company's collapse, and I'd learned that doing the right thing didn't always feel righteous. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Sarah, this is David Chen. I wanted to thank you for what you did. I know it wasn't easy, and I know some of us haven't been fair to you. But you saved us from being complicit in something much worse." I typed back, "Thank you, David. I hope you're doing well." "I am. New job, fresh start." "Sarah, I've been thinking about what you said in that conference room, that justice was more important than convenience. I disagreed with you then, but I understand now that you were right." As I prepared for bed, I thought about the celebration I'd missed 6 months ago, when my colleagues had toasted a victory built on fraud while I'd sat alone in my office, knowing what the next day would bring. They had celebrated without me, and I hadn't minded because I'd understood that temporary joy based on deception was less valuable than lasting justice based on truth. The investigation was over, the trial was complete, and justice had been served. But the real resolution wasn't in Marcus's conviction, or the civil settlements, or the vindication of my decision to expose the fraud. The real resolution was in the knowledge that sometimes the most important thing you can do is tell the truth, even when that truth destroys the illusions that people have built their lives around. The hardest part of seeking justice isn't gathering evidence or facing consequences. It's accepting that doing the right thing doesn't always feel good, and that protecting people sometimes requires disappointing them.